Afternoon, everybody.
Hey. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so we can get started. Welcome to the 10th session of the 40th session of the Faculty Senate of Texas A&M University. If you need a reminder of the Zoom features used in our Senate meetings, the Zoom tip sheet can be found on our website at the top of the current agenda page. At this time, please make sure your microphone is muted. Senator Andrew Klein will be monitoring the raise hands function. He will verbally identify you, then you can unmute your mic and ask your question. In fairness to others, please limit yourself to one question at a time. Senator Klein will also be monitoring the chat to convey messages as necessary, so please send any chat questions directly to him. We're using the registration function of Zoom to track attendance. Most visitors today have been asked to view the meeting via our live stream, but our guests and administrators who may be asked to answer questions are joining via Zoom. Visitors wishing to address the Senate may make this request by sending a chat message to Senator Klein or by using the raise hands function. Finally, if a senator wishes to offer a motion during today's meeting, please raise your hand at the appropriate time and ask to be recognized. Joining us today as guest speaker is Dr. Christy Orr, Director of Disability Services. Dr. Orr is the direct line of contact for students with accessibility issues and compliance concerns. Many questions have cropped up recently in Senate meetings dealing with disability services, and Dr. Orr quickly volunteered to update the Senate. A link to her presentation has been added to the agenda. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Orr.
Thank you, Dale. I appreciate having the time here to speak. I don't know if you want me to share my screen or you do have the presentation linked in the agenda, so I'm happy to do whatever works best for the Senate.
I think whatever works best for you.
Well, then I'll just let you look at the presentation on your own because screen sharing always makes me nervous. So I deleted everything off of my screen except for my presentation, but I'll just go with it here. I did want to make one clarification before I continue on, and it may seem silly to you, but given the work that I do, we changed our name of our office to Disability Resources several years ago. So I know we get called Disability Services a lot, but it was a very intentional change in that we want to be a resource for the whole campus community, and we are as much a resource for faculty as we are for students. So we want to make sure that you see that. We don't see ourselves as a service to be provided, but really just a resource for the campus community to be able to provide more accessibility for students here on campus. And hopefully, after we do that for students, there's also some more accessibility for faculty members with disabilities, for staff, really for visitors, for anyone here on our campus community. So in the presentation, I do have our right name, even though every once in a while I will slip out and say services too, because 20-something years is a long time to be saying a different name. But the first thing that I want to share with you also goes right in line with that is our mission. So disability resources staff members interact and collaborate with faculty, staff, and students to achieve an equitable learning environment for students with disabilities at Texas A&M. And in the version that you have in the presentation, I underlined collaborate and to achieve an equitable learning environment, because I think that's super important. We do see ourselves as partners with faculty members. I know sometimes faculty members may feel like we're telling them what to do. And to be honest, sometimes we feel like faculty members are telling us what to do. But really, we want to be collaborating together to figure out what's right for your class, for the student, and just make sure that we're working together to achieve that access. And it is about equitable learning environment. So we are not here to try to provide some sort of additional leg up. We're not trying to do something to give students an unfair advantage. What we're trying to do is make sure that we are giving them a level playing field. So we want it to be equitable for all of the students here on campus. So with that, our responsibility is that our office determines accommodations and we address any challenges that students face with those accommodations. We also collaborate, again, we love that word, with faculty to address any kind of accessibility issues. We love to do that proactively if we can. So if you have a class where maybe some students are struggling over and over again with your class, or they're asking for a lot of accommodations in certain areas, you are welcome to contact us and we can start talking about how maybe we could look at that from the front end when you're designing your courses for the next semester. And maybe looking at doing some things that will make it more accessible for all the students in your class. We do provide assistive technology assessment. We provide assistive technology. Some of that is with exams. So sometimes we're doing that for exams. Sometimes that's with textbooks or other learning materials that students are using. We do provide testing accommodations, which is really what most of the things that I've heard. I've been listening to Faculty Senate for the last few months. And pretty much probably everything that I've heard is related to the testing center. So we acknowledge, although that's not maybe always our favorite thing to do, that is something that we are very much known for as we have grown and grown and grown, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. And then we do have sign language interpreting and transcription that we organize, and we have one staff sign language interpreter who will come to the classes, as well as the transcription, which is like a court reporter coming to class and typing everything that's said in class. So obviously one of the big things I need to tell you about is our statistics, because that is impacting what we do in great ways. So for the spring 2022 through spring 23, I gave you the statistics for those semesters. Fall is kind of what a lot of times we benchmark on, because that is always, we see more students in the fall and it drops a little bit in the spring typically. I do have numbers for you of this spring, but it's really important to note that those numbers were as of March 9th. So when you look at the number of finals for this spring, we still have students scheduling all kind of finals coming up. In addition, we continually register students with this office all the way through the semester. So we stop about a couple weeks before the end of the semester, but we will have more students that are affiliated with our office by the time we get to May. So things that I thought would be most important for you to know are the total exams given for fall of 2020 or spring of 2022. We gave 10,408 exams. Fall of 2022, we gave 12,643 exams. And then so far this spring, we've already given 11,966, which is more than we gave last spring all semester long. So a theme is emerging here. Final exams for spring of 2022, we gave 2,821. Fall, we gave 3,268. And then this spring so far, final exams scheduled in our office are 1,466. That would be my dream. That's not happening. I wish we were only giving 1,400 exams, which on a lot of campuses, they would think that was a huge number. But for us, we're used to 3,000 something. Total classes, which is something we just started looking at more recently when we switched to our new AIM database. But we had in the fall, the spring of 2022, it was 4,555. total classes. Fall, 5,220 different classes, which does include different sections. So different sections of the classes count also. And then this spring so far, 4,664 classes. Total instructors. So I'll tell you in a minute why this is so important. Total instructors, 2,158 spring of last year, 2,375 for the fall. And then this spring so far, 2,145. And then spring numbers, total number of students. So this is students registered with our office. So that they do not all have testing accommodations, but a lot of them do. So last spring, 3,109. Last fall, 4,257, and then in the spring, 3,152. Now, I will have one caveat there. So I did this a couple weeks ago, around March 9th, and we have been with our AIM system that a lot of you are aware of. I don't know why. I've talked to other schools. It's a little bit challenging sometimes to get statistics that we feel super comfortable with. So getting the number of students, there's a lot of different ways you can get that number. And I believe that number is actually pretty low, the 4,257, and it is actually closer to 4,900. So I hate that. I like things to be perfect and exact, but I can look and see what we can find out. I don't know why their system's real confusing, but it depends on what kind of report you run what the numbers are. Either way, lots of students, more students all the time, and then we have also heard 14,000-ish incoming freshmen, so there's going to be more coming next fall. So with that, we've had some internal challenges, as you can imagine. We do have, again, the continued increase in the number of students with accommodations. We also, this doesn't relate as much to testing, but we have more complicated testing or more complicated accommodation requests. So any of you who've worked with a student that has modified attendance, so someone potentially with a chronic health condition. So we'll give an easy example real quickly. Someone that has migraines, they could miss a lot of class. There's nothing they can do about it. Going to the doctor doesn't help. They need to stay home, take care of themselves, get better. From the faculty perspective, they need to go to class. We agree. From the student perspective, they can't go to class. They've got a really bad migraine, they have to stay home. We're kind of in the middle trying to figure out what's reasonable. You know, we want them to go to class. They want to go to class. They can't go to class. They could be really smart. They could know all the material, but they just can't come to class. So it's a lot more complicated than that, which is the point of kind of putting that on here. That gets really challenging as we're trying to figure out what's reasonable and what's not. Dealing with requests for remote attendance. You know, we've had that continue, very limited, but we have to look at each of those situations on a case-by-case basis and make a determination about what to do for those students. And then there's others. So we are getting more students asking for extra time on outside of class assignments, which in the past we would just say that's a time management issue, we're not doing it. Now we have to look at it, try to determine if we're not doing that, what do we do? If we do think it's reasonable, what is reasonable? How much time? What for this class? What for that class? So it gets very complicated what we do when we're dealing with students on an individual basis, and we're getting close to 5,000 students that we're working with. And staffing shortages. I know this is something across campus. It's not just us, but when we have had vacancies, trying to fill a vacancy sometimes has taken 2 or 3 failed job searches before we find someone to fill that position. So typically as the director, I don't take a caseload of students. Last fall, because we were shorthanded, I had 400 students that I worked with individually in addition to my director responsibilities. So that's not to say kudos to me, that's just to say this is what we do when we're shorthanded. Everyone has to pitch in and do more than they had to do in the past, and it's more complicated and there's more students. Also had problems with student assistants, which is graduate students for us in the testing center. So we've had to hire more to fill in the gaps that we've had. We're having to continually train, which a lot of times looks very transactional, you know, just here's how you do it. Trying to get them to be past that, to understand why it's important, how to help students feel more comfortable, how to talk to a faculty member that may call and have a concern is very challenging when we're having to add more graduate students all the time. And then they quit because they get a better job or they get an assistantship. And so then we're left with having to hire more. So that's been a challenge. And then lack of adequate space. So we have 2 big suites here in the Student Services building. We thought it was great when we opened in the spring of 2020, and now we're out of space in our testing center. So we moved the 2 people that do most of our administrative tasks over into our main office suite and some space we had there. But we run out of seats for students testing too. So last semester, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but we said we're not going to make any kind of extensions on our deadlines for finals. We still will provide exceptions for during the regular semester, but if there's a student who does not meet our deadline for a Thursday exam, most likely they're going to be told no, because we actually literally run out of seats. And what happens then is we reserve conference rooms in our building. So we have to get a room, then we have to have a proctor. So we have to find a proctor to be in that room who knows what they're doing, along with all the other stuff that we're doing. So that's a challenge. I hate to gripe. So I hate saying all of these things, but this is a reality that we're dealing with. And I think we do a pretty good job given all of that reality. But the external challenges are also something that's been challenging for us. So that large number of instructors that I mentioned before, the challenge with that is that you may not realize, and I know some of you do because I've worked with some of you, that you all like different things on your test. So we may have one instructor that says, please do not give any students scratch paper, which is totally fine. They don't want scratch paper. And then we have another instructor who says, why are you sending all this scratch paper to me? I don't want this scratch paper. I want them just to use whatever they want. It's open book, it's open note. They can use their phone, they can use whatever. Usually not their phone, I just kind of made that part up. But it's very different what you want in an exam. I know many years ago, we had an economics exam and the professor was really frustrated because we wouldn't let students use a calculator on their test because they didn't indicate on our testing form that we had at that time that they could use a calculator. And they said, of course they can use a calculator on an economics test. But as you can guess, not every economics professor lets students use a calculator. So that's why we have the testing agreement. If you're familiar with the testing center in AIM, there is that testing agreement. We rely heavily on that. But it still is challenging sometimes to interpret what that means, or maybe the instructor meant one thing on one test and they forgot to change their testing agreement. So there's just a lot of moving parts that we're dealing with. Sometimes we have a lack of understanding of shared responsibility. So that collaboration is important. I think sometimes there are professors that when they approach us, treat it as if they are doing us a favor by getting their test to us and us providing the accommodations, when actually we're working on that together. So we see that as a service that we're providing to faculty, the testing center. Some schools don't have a testing center. Some schools' faculty members have to do the tests. They have to provide the accommodations. We don't want that necessarily, but we do want it to be seen as a partnership, that we want to see what we can do to make your life better and what can you do to help us be better and more efficient and more effective in what we do. We have challenges with exams not being received in a timely manner. So the amount of time that my staff spend in phone calls and emails trying to find out where a test is, and then sometimes a student comes to take their test and we don't have it. And so we have to tell the student, we don't have your test. We're continuing to try to get a hold of the faculty member. We don't know what to tell you. And sometimes we have to say, you're going to have to go and we'll tell the faculty member and we'll schedule your makeup as soon as you can. But we can't give you a test that we don't have. And you can imagine who usually gets the heat for that is going to be my staff in my office, because we didn't have the test, but we did everything we could. As you know, you get multiple reminders about exams if you don't have it into us, which we also do understand. That I will be honest, I am someone who a lot of times works right up to my deadline. This whole spring break thing meant I got this presentation done early, but usually I'm like wanting to get it done the day before, if not, later than that. So we understand. It's just that the challenge happens if we have 10 faculty members who all don't have their tests here, and one of them has 20 students, and then we've got a line and we don't have the test. It really is challenging for us. And then I did mention already, specialized instructions, wanting tests done in a certain way. It's very challenging. So I do have some solutions. So I hate griping. That's all the gripes. Now addressing the challenges. And I'm happy to hear if you have suggestions, whether it's in this meeting. I don't want to take too much time. Also, you can contact me directly. My email is on the presentation. So some of the things that we've done, and then some of the things that I think could help. For final exams, last fall, we changed our process for checking in for final exams. And you may have heard about hour-long waits for checking in for finals. In the MSc, where we give most of our finals, we had probably half of the MSc reserved. We had lots and lots of volunteers, well over 100 volunteers, and we did it more like a classroom setting. And it worked really, really well. So students in our building still had some challenges with waiting, so we've got to figure that piece out. But That is the first time we've ever done that. I've been here almost 25 years, and we have done finals the same way as far as the check-in process the whole time. One student at a time, check in, get your stuff. And we changed it completely this final. So that was big, took lots and lots of effort, lots of meetings, lots of planning, but it worked really well. So that was a big win for us, very exciting. We provided that email that I know was referenced in a faculty senate meeting at the beginning of the semester, which I know was a little challenging. I actually softened it down a little bit. One of my staff members wanted to say that faculty members have to give us their tests 3 days beforehand. And I said, we don't have the power to say that. So you can all thank me for that. Not trying to dictate what you do, but letting you know that if you could get it into us earlier, it really helps us, and it really helps the students not be stressed too. So trying to give a little bit more information about what's helpful, because we know you're not in our shoes and you don't know, some of the challenges that we have. So that's why that email went out, is just to try to figure out some ways that you could help support us. I know in the last faculty senate meeting, they also mentioned, so we do have a working group looking at our office and about disability on campus, some of the things that we could do better there. I think that is supposed to be over at the end of this semester. So hopefully there'll be some recommendations from there. And 2 weeks ago, actually almost 3 weeks ago, we had an external review of our office. So something that we do every 7 years or so is bring in an external reviewer. We do a self-study. So along with all the other things we've been doing, we also did a self-study of our office, surveyed our staff, brought students, faculty, staff, and some of you I know participated in some of those meetings. And we brought an external reviewer in from the University of Minnesota, which is a huge operation there for their students with disabilities. And she'll be getting us a report in the next couple of weeks that we will be able to take back and have some recommendations that hopefully we will get some support from the university for, and some internal process related things too, that we can make some changes. We are examining our testing center staffing. So we just had a move from one of our testing center staff into our main office, which is good and bad. So as those things kind of happen, we are continually looking at what can we do different. We had some graduate assistants. We changed to having all just graduate students who were working with us, hoping we could get some more people in, save some money. We developed a 9-month position to work in the testing center as a staff member. Didn't quite work as well as we wanted to. So now we just met today to try to figure out if we could add a couple of staff members instead of having so many graduate students. We just lose some of that continuity of having someone who's been there, who knows. Having to train over and over and over again has been a challenge. So we're trying to look at the staffing in the testing center and figure out if there's something that we could do differently. Satellite testing centers. So I know some of you have been involved in some of that discussion. That is really could be a great answer to that. There is a proposal from the College of Business. I don't know if there's any movement on that, but potentially for them to be able to proctor some of the tests over there. There's Trevor. I was looking for you all over. So Trevor has that proposal in. I sent my hearty support for that because it would be beneficial for the faculty over there who will get their tests proctored the way they want them. And it would also free up some space in our testing center. We're trying to work with the math department to do a couple of final exams over in the math department, just as a pilot to see. The challenge is when my staff have to go help, it's really challenging because then we're not here to do our part. So we're trying to figure out how that would work. I will let Trevor speak to the proposal here in just a second because I only have a couple things to get through, but I think there's a question about that. Education for instructors. So trying to provide more of that email. We're just trying to give you guys information. We don't want to bombard you, but we do want you to know some things that would be helpful for you to know. We love to do outreach and do presentations. So we probably have not done as many of those as we should be because of our high number of students. So I'm hoping maybe with some of these suggestions from these reviews that we're doing, maybe we'll get to do that a little bit more. And then just a proactive approach to inclusive class design. So that's what I mentioned earlier. We would love to work with faculty members to figure out ways that you could design your class so that maybe there wasn't as much reliance on exams and maybe less of a need for accommodations. So I know for some of you that is a very foreign concept, not something you're interested in. Some people I know, like Dr. Laporte, are in big favor of that and trying to do some of that already. One of my staff members is actually going to work with a faculty member on a class where she's going to try to redesign the whole thing to make it more inclusive. And so super excited about that, but that also takes time. And so we would love to focus a little bit more on that. But I think, Trevor, if you want to share about your proposal rather than me trying to share, that would probably be better.
Yeah, I just see the question from Senator Alvarado. Yeah, so it's a proposal to my dean with Professor Wesner about looking into a testing center for the Mays Business School. The model is at the University of Central Florida, where they have dozens of testing centers across campus. Some of them have thousands of seats, and some of them open 24/7. You go in, you swipe your ID, say you want your econ quiz or your marketing exam. You say market exam, go to computer 312. Here's what you can take with you. They have lockers for backpacks. They don't need lockdown browser because they control all the computers. You're not worried about the students' Wi-Fi. You don't have to worry about extended time for tests in class because that's taken care of internally to that. Granted, it means you have all your exams on an LMS and not paper or anything like that. But I walked across one at the University of Central Florida, and there's a sign above the door now administering 327 assessments at that very moment. So we have a proposal in. I have Dr. Orr's help on that with email into Nate, as well as Blair from the Academic Honor System office. We'd like to, see if we can do it here and then replicate it all across campus. I do believe there was work on this. Help me out, Tim or Alan, with Carol, with Sean Jasperson before COVID, something like that. And then, COVID, nothing happened. Anyway, that's what the proposal's for. We'll see how far it goes. Anyway.
Yes, Sean did have some online. They had graduate students proctoring online exams during COVID. So yes, and I think that's something that could be built on. And he has a lot of that expertise. We actually work with him a decent amount when we're doing stuff in our testing center, just to get his opinion, his advice, because we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to support everyone. And I try to talk really fast because I could talk about this for a really long time because I'm pretty passionate, if you couldn't tell, but I'm happy to take questions if there's time for questions.
Yes, we definitely have time for questions. Are there any for Dr. Orr?
Senator Laporte had her hand up first.
Mine wasn't a question because Christy and I have worked together over the years. Mine was more a comment and some data now to support that. I have over 100 students in one of my classes, and in that particular class, I got 11 disability resource notifications of students needing additional testing time, maybe need to get up during the class and move around, all sorts of accommodations that came up in those 11 notifications. And because of the way that I teach the class with no exams and lots of active learning and lots of doing, I have not had to accommodate one student this semester at all. The students with those kinds of accommodations love getting up, and they love talking in the class, and they love walking around the room and not having exams and having alternative forms of assessment. So my drive on campus is to change the pedagogy so we don't need testing centers at all. But I want to thank Christy, because over the years we've slowly become disentangled as I've removed that form of assessment from my class.
Senator Hale has his hand up next.
Yeah, so I'll go to the other end of that. We need testing centers because, well, we need testing centers, Senator Laporte. And I had a question though. Of those 4,000 students, and this will help me out with my proposal, how many of them are mostly, I don't know, I mean, there's other, priority seating and some other things, are mostly at just the 1.5, 2x time. Can you help me out with that, Doctor? Or maybe put some dive on that number?
Yeah, I would say this is totally a shot in the dark. I would probably say 85% have testing accommodations that are just the regular. Oh, good. I see Dr. Tag shaking his head like people, you guys see the letters, but so with just extended time, reduced distraction environment. Then we have the other ones that are, some of the modified attendance, some of those different things, but also some of the more specialized ones where we will probably have to accommodate some of the ones that have more, more than double time, or have a reader or scribe or things like that. Some of that might need to be in our office, but a lot of that could be just in another testing center.
But predominantly 80, 85% is just the extra time. All of that goes away with testing centers. I use 36-minute quizzes so it fits in a 75-minute class because of, Catherine says she uses classes of 100. I have classes of 400. I get 11 a week with disability requests. Most of them are just for extra time. But for the 2 or 3 or 4 that need 2x, I have 36-minute quizzes. That is the epitome of the tail wagging the dog. I want those 36 minutes back. I want those classes back. I want those 13 quizzes that I give in class back in teaching, not using for assessment. Granted, that pushes it down on the student, but I'm looking for other solutions to help with cheating. This originally started all this, was no need to study.com.
Senator Falvo had her hand up next.
Thank you, Senator Klein, and thank you very much for that presentation. I have 2 very quick questions. I know we're only supposed to ask one at once, but I feel like this might cheat. Do these numbers apply to Galveston? That's the easy question. Or are these only main campus numbers?
These are only main campus numbers and some of the satellite campuses, but not Galveston. They have a separate office.
Okay, thank you. That was my first question. My second question is more of a pulse kind of question. I'm wondering if what I've been hearing from faculty is that requests for these things, particularly the stickier kinds of accommodations like attendance, and have increased since the pandemic, and that represents actually students advocating for their own mental health in really productive ways. Do you feel like the increased requests for these are a consequence of the pandemic and the ways we've been talking about mental health, or do you think that this is just because we have an influx of students?
I think it's complicated. I think it's both. So it's that. It's also more as we accept more students, we're probably getting more students who might have had accommodations in high school. They may have done well enough now where in the past maybe they would have struggled more because they might not have gotten accommodations. I think it's a combination of all of that. There's less stigma about all kinds of disabilities. So it's not just mental health. There's less stigma about ADHD. There's also more students getting diagnosed with ADHD. So it's both, and there's just lots of reasons why we're getting more students that are registered with the office. And that's across the country. It's not just in our area.
Senator Hammond
Thank you.
next.
Hi, yeah, thank you for that great presentation. I would also like to state that I've been working very hard to make my classes as accessible as possible, with a lot of help from your group and stuff. And this includes a machine learning course on recognizing hand-drawn sketches that was taken by a blind from birth PhD student. And that student was one of the best performers in the class. So you can imagine how amazing that is, when, being able to recognize what someone drew. So that's really exciting. And so that leads me to my question, which is, I'm very excited to hear about your virtual attendance accommodations. I do know, what sort of rationales have been acceptable? Because I do know that for blind students, they have a lot of trouble functioning in large spaces, especially with whispering voices, as their auditory channel becomes overloaded, and also less helpful in being able to serve as an alternative visual, because they can do clicking sounds and sort of to really get an idea of their space. And in large classrooms, especially when we're being more and more trendy with our design and creating these spaces that aren't very welcome acoustically for blind students, just if you have any thoughts in that space.
Yeah, so typically, I'll be totally honest, because the dictate from above was that face-to-face classes are supposed to be face-to-face classes. So we have been very stringent about that. Primarily, I'm trying to think, we just had a student death, and it was a student who had a double lung transplant. And so that student was not here in person in class last fall. He was remote, but unfortunately he passed away. So that's the level that we're looking at. I hate to be whatever, but because that is what we've been told, face-to-face classes are to be face-to-face. So when we have students who are so severely compromised that we know that, being here is life-threatening, that's typically what we're looking at. It doesn't mean we don't consider every request. So we do. And again, that's part of the time, is we do consider every request, but we have to determine with the classes, with the accommodations, with the parameters of being at Texas A&M University and what's required to be here. That's kind of what we're looking at.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. I hope you think about how to sort of broaden that in the future, especially with the mental health stuff. I do think that those are, interesting things to think about as well, at least in terms of giving people a break, or, every other class or something. Yeah.
Senator Fickle has his hand up next.
Well, I'm going to be on the other side of the fence, so everybody can go ahead and start to get upset with me. But I'm concerned when, I've made it through. I've got over 400 students this semester, a lot of accommodations. I'm accommodating everybody in class. And if they need extended time, I can work it out here in our building. My concern is when a student comes to me and says, I have ADA accommodations. And a lot of these accommodations are not ADA accommodations. So maybe they're making it up, or maybe they're getting it from somewhere else. But when a student leaves here and goes to work, they're not going to be, in the case of I teach in construction science, in my 35 years on job sites in construction, I never saw anybody say, here, I need you to do this, and then gave something similar to the person in the cubicle beside him and said, I need you to do this, but you get 1.5 times as much time to do it. So when we set people up to say, we're going to make accommodations for you and we're going to give you more time, but when they graduate, they're not going to be given more time to do the same task. They're going to be judged by whether or not they do what their peers are able to do. Is all of this good? And I'm not sure that all of it is.
Sure, I understand your concern. And I've been here 25 years. I've heard it many times before. And I think that the difference is in typically what we're saying for the accommodations, it depends on what they are. But when it's for classroom exams, typically in an educational or in a work setting, it would be very rare for someone to get an assignment or an exam and have an hour or an hour and a half and have to complete that exam and not have any kind of resources, not being able to talk to anyone, not be able to use the internet, not be able to do it and look at a book, but just sit quietly and do that assignment until it's done. Typically in a work setting, they're going to have a time period for that. They might have the internet, they might have colleagues that they're working with. So it's not really a one-to-one that when you leave and you go to work, you have the same kind of environment that we have here educationally. So I always think about the trainings. The only tests I ever take at work are my trainings for A&M. And those trainings, when we take them, you can take it over and over again until you get the score that you wanted to make to pass. Sometimes, I try to take them too fast and I fail some questions and I have to go back and redo it again. But I have, however, I have a certain amount of months to complete it or a week to complete it or whatever, and I can get it done. So most jobs, I'm sure there are some that I'm not aware of, but most occupations, you have a time period. So it might be a week, but we're not saying necessarily you get a week and a half to do it. We're saying that when you have an hour-long assignment, you have an hour and a half to do it. So it's really a different kind of setting typically than you would have in a work setting. Now, there may be other accommodations that fit more with that. And the other thing is that when people go out into the working world, they're going to hopefully self-accommodate and figure those jobs that will work for them. So if they know they need a quieter environment to get their work done, and they're going to apply to those places where they can get that. So there's a lot of different factors to it. And really, according to the law, we're not supposed to say like, well, you're not going to get this accommodation in your job, so we're not going to provide it here. But I do understand that what you're saying is, are we doing a disservice to the students? And I think the issue is that they're not going to have to do what they do here out in the real world.
I somewhat disagree with you, and they will be judged in most businesses against their peers. And that's just the way that it is. And so, okay, I'll just let it rest.
We can always have a conversation if you want to later. I really don't mind. I'm not offended by any of it, and I'm happy to have any conversation that you would want to with anyone.
So I think setting them up for success is teaching them how to be successful in the world that they're going to have to go live in.
Senator Laporte has her hand up next.
Mine was a rebut back to Larry and Trevor, but also to support Christy in that it comes back to the president's mandate of making our education relevant and giving students authentic assessment. And so what Christy said about setting them up in a room with no resources for a timed period that is arbitrary at the professor's discretion to test whether or not they know something is completely not real world relevant, and it's not real world. So, you know, I think this is a conversation that we could probably have offline, but there is a massive movement, and it's very divided in the pedagogy and in the literature, of people who want to have authentic assessment that tests people in real world scenarios or with real world problems, rather than multiple choice tests in timed environments. I could talk about this forever, but we need as a university to be thinking about our relevance and the opportunities that we're affording our students through the assessment methodologies that we're using.
Senator Hammond has her hand up next.
Yeah, so this is changing the topic a little bit, so we might be going back to that in a minute with Asha and Adam, but I just wanted to ask a different question, which is I'm the general conference chair for an 800-person conference that's happening in October at TAMU, and we want to make it as accessible as possible so we can have a really good showing for Texas A&M. We have a subcommittee on diversity. We're hiring a sign language interpreter, have an overflow room to support people who may need to watch in a smaller space because of neurodiversity, or for participants with small kids that need to be with them while they're at the conference. We also have lots of experience making accessible videos and documents. That said, my question for your office is your office a place where we can reach out to see what we're missing? Do you ever have one of your staff members serve on a subcommittee of a conference to ensure an equitable experience for everyone? You know, just making, you know, not expecting you guys to do more work, but just sort of checking our decision making to make sure that we're not missing out on something.
Yeah, I definitely would. Feel free to reach out to me, Tracy. I'm going to also put in the chat. We have a webinar that we did in our accessibility and Aggiland webinar series that was about accessible meetings and conferences, and I will find it while we're talking and stick it in the chat.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.
Senator Rao had her hand up next.
I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments being made, and I kind of have to agree with Senator Fickel's comments. And also, I think Dana said something in the chat that sometimes the professional students need to be making more, decisions more immediately. They don't have extra time. But I completely understand people with, disability. Yes, with certain things, we absolutely must accommodate them. But I do teach an online course, and we do have a week or two for some of these students to complete their assignments. But now I'm seeing a lot more students wanting more time, even with that 1 week kind of an accommodation. You give them 1 week to finish everything, but still people will come up with some modified attendance, and it kind of comes to a point where I feel like there's also a time management issue. And I appreciate some of the people I've been working with at the Disability, Resources Center, and they do agree, but I think sometimes students tend to think that just because they have accommodations, they can stretch it as much as they can. So if you have an assignment or anything that is due, you have a week to work on, there has to be some kind of a time management that goes, that they should take responsibility for too. So I think I'm seeing that a lot more now than ever before. We used to never have that issue, but as I said, at least with the testing center or even with the disability resources staff, they kind of agree and they're kind of working with the students. I'm just worried that at least if they're all giving the students that, okay, you have reasonable time to finish this, so there has to be some other resources that you may need to be able to manage your time well and, take whatever you need to take rest. It's not like it's timed. So there must be some other thing that the students need. That's what I'm getting at.
Senator Kolozinski has his hand up next.
Yeah, so I I just would like to say that while it's true that exams are not real world in the sense that when you're out on the job, you're not going to be taking exams. It's in a lot of fields, if you want to be an effective professional in a lot of fields, certainly in my field, there's certain things you just have to know off the top of your head. And I mean, if you're going to be a financial professional, you have to know off the top of your head that bond prices go up when interest bond prices go down when interest rates go up. You have to know off the top of your head what LIBOR is. You have to know off the top of your head what net present value means. And that kind of knowledge can really only be assessed via exams. So I don't think we're ever going to get away from exams. That's all I'm going to say. I don't have a position on other stuff that we're talking about, but
I'd just like to call on myself. So Christy said earlier that she has a 500-person caseload as director. I would just like to say, to put that in some context, that's above what is a recommended caseload for a full-time person doing just that. So I think we really need to appreciate the real staffing issues that they're facing right now. I think she kind of undersold some of the difficulties that they're actually facing. Senator Preston Cunningham has her hand up next.
Hey, Dr. Orr, I just have a quick question for you. What is the process? I know you mentioned earlier about now they are talking about allowing extra time for even out of class assignments. What is the process for how you verify that accommodations are needed? Because in my class, I'm seeing a lot of extra time. I don't really do exams for the very reason some people have mentioned earlier. But like I post an assignment up at the very beginning of the semester and it's not due for 6 weeks. And then they're like, oh, I get extra time. It's been up for 6 weeks. So how are y'all verifying the need for these accommodations?
That's a great question. So that it is a rare accommodation to have extra time on outside of class assignments. And that is not typically, so if you see extra time on test exams and quizzes, that's what that means. So that does not mean an assignment that was assigned 6 weeks in advance. And it typically doesn't mean like an online where you have a week and a half to do it or something like that. So if we are saying extra time on assignments, we are looking at that with the student based on what their needs are, again, very rare, and we're looking at each class and assignment individually. So we are looking at this class, so I can give an example of one that's a vague example because I don't remember the specifics, but it was a lab where they did the lab on a Thursday and they got the assignment, and then the professor for whatever reason was not available to answer any questions or provide any assistance till Monday, and it was due on Monday, and this student had a lot of processing challenges. So he knew he was going to have to be able to access the professor in order to get information to help. And, you know, most of the time you're going to have access during some sort of office hours before an assignment is assigned and then due. And so we did like 1 extra day. So it was very specific. So if you get something that is not super specific, doesn't make sense, and it says extra time on any kind of outside of class assignment, or really if you get any accommodation that you don't know what you're supposed to do, you can contact our office. You can just email the disability@tamu.edu email because I'm the one who typically checks it and I'll get it to the right person. Or there's an access coordinator assigned. You can see that in AIM, who the person's access coordinator is. We try as much as possible to work through a college model. So hopefully you know, or you can find out who your rep is for your college, and that person can always be a contact. That's on our website. So if you just look at college, go to our website, disability.tamu.edu, and look up college. You can see who the access coordinator is that works with the majority of students in your college if that's their major, and that person can work with you. So we again, collaborate. We are happy for you to contact us and say, I don't understand this accommodation, or I don't agree with this accommodation. If you don't agree with it, contact our office. Don't say anything to the student. Contact us, tell us you don't agree, and then let's work through it. You may or may not be right, and we can talk about what that means.
So are the accommodations usually meant because you have some type of medical background of the student coming in to get the accommodation, or is it all just by the meeting with the caseworker?
No, we do get documentation for each student, and so for most students, if there may be some exceptions, but for most students we have documentation. So the students self-report prior accommodations and their documentation is how we make that decision. That's a great question, Tammy.
So perhaps Angie has a last question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it might be helpful to maybe clarify the discussion or the statements on accommodations, because if a faculty member is, sometimes our terminology, I think, is more aligned with the in-class test that many of us are used to, but so many, like you say, projects, lab writing that they have a week to do, things like that. It's not always clear for a new faculty member in particular, or as things have changed, what the terminology should be. So maybe a few more words might be helpful to explain the difference between the examples that you just gave. That would be more helpful to somebody saying, you need extra time on something you're doing in class. It's very short time, but if they've got 6 weeks, they don't need extra time, something to that nature.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. That's a great point. I wrote that down. We, of course, like all of us, we have the same accommodations. We try to change them every once in a while, but as the world has changed so much in the last few years with so many more online exams, I don't think our language has probably kept up with that. So happy to look at that language.
I would really like to wrap this up, but I see there two more hands up, and I can end with Senators Hale and Cecilio. So Senator Hale.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for recognizing me, Speaker Rice. So along what Senator Angie Hill-Price was talking about, there are things that are in between now. This speaks to Senator Fickle's question. I used to give a week to do a 400-minute exam. So if you got double time, take 800 minutes. I don't care, because I would give hard problems. I believe problem solving was what I'm after. I believe it's a learnable skill. I didn't care about double time or 1.5. The longest anyone ever took was 240 minutes. They took 6 hours. Go ahead, knock yourself out. So I would just make it longer than that. And then we had someone who said, well, I have modified attendance. And I said, no, Title IV, help me out if I'm wrong with this, Dr. Orr. I think we had a discussion about this, and we came to a solution like, you don't get a modified deadline. I'll open it up earlier for you. Go ahead. But I'm not modifying the deadline per Title IV because what was the rule? I release the solutions on a set schedule. I think that's the Title IV. Help me out if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think, big thing, I think that what Trevor just said is a great point. He contacted our office. So let's talk through. If you have concerns, questions, let's figure it out together to make sure we're keeping the university in compliance. And we don't want y'all to have to deal with any issues either of people complaining to you. So we want to work together on that.
Yeah, and I've gone to at least 36-minute quizzes, Senator Fickle, because of cheating. This is why I'm here. I need testing centers.
And Dr. Cecilio with the last question.
Thank you very much, Speaker Rice, and I'll be very brief. Dr. Orr, I've watched you from afar for decades, and I'm so very proud of what you do for the students and faculty here at Texas A&M. And I hope that the Faculty Senate can continue to advocate for the needs of the students and the faculties, and for you to get adequate staffing to help you help them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cecilio. Full disclosure, he was my daughter's, all three of them, pediatrician. And now I'm a grandmother. So I have, that connection to Dr. Cecilio. But
More of that, please.
I appreciate all of your comments, questions, and I am honestly being honest here when I say I am happy to have the conversations and the questions. So if you have concerns, questions, please contact our office. I would much rather have us come to an agreement, or maybe we agree to disagree, and that's okay too, but at least we can, be on the same page.
Christy, thank you so much for coming today. I really want to take note of what Senator Ellis put in the chat, and that was her experience of over the years dealing with your office and being really impressed with the results. And I think that one of the things that you have emphasized today is the importance of keeping the channels of communication open. And I think that we just need to do more of that, and for your office to know that the Faculty Senate is definitely an advocate. We're on your side. So again, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and effort today.
Thank you for the opportunity very much. I appreciate it and appreciate all of you. I know I've worked with a lot of you over the years. I appreciate it. And just a quick addition to that, I know y'all need to move on, but I didn't get to say yet, I have amazing staff members. So I appreciate Senator Ellis's comment and Senator Rice's comment that they are amazing and do a great job. So those numbers you hear and how understaffed we are, you probably don't even realize how much that impacts us because they really do a great job. So thank you, thanks. And I'm gonna listen in because that's what I've been doing the last few months.
Thank you. So we are moving on now to Dr. Julie Harlan, the Associate Dean of the Graduate and Professional School, who is joining us today. We also have a link to her presentation in the agenda. And welcome, former Speaker Harlan.
Thank you, Dale. It's great to be back with the Senate to share with you in the sort of spirit of open communication and keeping channels open, a project that some of you may not be aware of that is absolutely an amazing resource on our campus. So as Dale said, I am an associate dean in the Graduate and Professional School. I've been in that role for about 2.5 years now. Also still have a faculty appointment in the Department of Ag Leadership, Education, and Communication in the College of Ag. And joining me today is Dr. Radhika Rururu, who is a clinical professor in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Culture in the School of Education and Human Development. So I want to start by just asking if you could give me an emoji or something in the chat that if you know what CERTL stands for, if you've been engaged in any CERTL programming at Texas A&M or anywhere else, if you could give me a yes, a thumbs up, any kind of emoji. I'm just curious about our audience and what your engagement with CERTL has been. Seeing just a few. So thank you for doing that. So hopefully you'll walk away today learning something new about our programming here at Texas A&M. So we have two major goals today. I promise we will be brief. We're going to give a brief overview of the CERTL National Network and CERTL at TAMU. And we're going to discuss 3 requests related to CERTL and TAR, which you'll learn what that is in a moment if you've done already. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rururu.
Thank you, Dr. Harlan. And just to give everyone a brief rundown on what CERTL is, it's also on the screen. It's the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning. And of course, we have a CERTL arm here at Texas A&M, but it is part of a national organization established 2003 through an NSF grant. But TAMU was part of the original 2006 network of 6 universities. It started over in Madison, Wisconsin, but now there are 43 members, and it's a wonderful national organization that's focused basically on improving teaching, mostly in the STEM disciplines, but they have extended their outreach to others as well. It's, as we said, it's a national network. It's open to faculty, postdocs, and grad students. And here at TAMU, in our arm of it, we have opportunities for all those entities, faculty, postdocs, and grad students. If we typically CERTL, there's a number of different activities that are conducted through the CERTL office, such as the Academy for Future Faculty and TAR, which we're here to talk more about, and the MOOCs. But underlying all of those are like 3 basic pillars that are super important. Learning in communities being one of them. So every CERTL activity in some way or the other engages the people in community with one another. So even for the national MOOC, we have a local learning community that meets weekly to discuss things that students and postdocs are learning in the MOOC, that make sure that it's not just, that isolated experience that we know is not in a learner's best interest. It's also very open to diverse individuals as well as diverse perspectives, which is, definitely something that has really enriched our understanding of teaching. And finally, again, what we're here to talk about the most, teaching is research. So this understanding that teaching is not just something that happens, it's not just something that people create on their own. Of course, there is a personal element to it, but there is a discipline and a field that understands what good teaching is. And the aim of CERTL is to let students engage with that knowledge base and to do research into, what constitutes good pedagogy, what are practices that help students learn, how do we reach all students? So it's a very intentional, very focused, very research-based program that encourages students to kind of delve into this other discipline around teaching and learning. Generally, as I've mentioned, we have multiple programs that are part of CERTL. And, you might be wondering, because we are here, of course, to ask everyone to encourage their students or perhaps themselves to engage with our programming more. And of course, there's so many opportunities available to students that one might wonder, what are some of the benefits specifically of CERTL? Definitely helps students improve their teaching and delivery skills. Of course, many of us, our mission is to prepare students to engage with the academy. So of course, this is something that we would all perhaps agree is quite desirable. It does help also our students stand out on the job market, given how competitive it is. It gives you that professional development in teaching. So these students and postdocs who get to be part of the TAR program get to engage in a community that talk about what constitutes good teaching. They get feedback from Dr. Harlan and myself and other people who are part of CERTL, but also the Center for Teaching Excellence. CERTL has national conferences and other opportunities to present. So students also have the chance to engage with a professional network, both across the university. Like we generally have students from pretty much every college at TAMU in our programs. And it definitely gives them that to be part of that national program. Now you can engage in CERTL in different ways, starting with the associate level. Students can get an associate certificate, and they can get more than one of those. That could be through the Academy for Future Faculty or the MOOC. The CERTL practitioner, you can get to that level also through our Teaching as Research Fellow program. Which, just to give you the brief overview as we get to talk about that, it is a program that you apply for, and as part of it, what you do is students they identify a problem that they would like to study in the classroom. For example, are short videos more engaging than long videos to chemical engineering students? So they frame a question, they read the literature, they develop a instrument of whatever kind, and then collect data on it, and then analyze that data and hopefully publish that. If you published it, that you would get to that final level, the CERTL Scholar. But if you went through the program and just submitted a one-page report, then you would have, you would get to that CERTL practitioner level. So there are different levels as part of CERTL. Definitely TAR is the one that helps you attain the highest levels, but there are different ways in which you can do that. You don't have to do them sequentially. And we do hold an annual CERTL banquet that celebrates our student and postdoc achievements.
So we are coming to you today really with 3 requests to be very specific. So that was our bar level overview. So our first request is that we need your help in identifying TAMU graduate courses primarily in teaching and learning that would be open to any graduate professional student. Sometimes we have students that want to go further, deeper. And so what we're exploring are ways that we can give CERTL certification to courses at Texas A&M. The benefit of that is that we can help promote those courses to a broad audience of students, which can also change who might be taking your classes if you're interested in additional student numbers, but that also helps our students gain those important skills. So if you have courses, please send them our way. We've gone through the catalog and have a list, and we'll be reaching out to departments and faculty to see if they're interested in joining that CERTL network in that way. And then number 2 is our Teaching as Research Fellows program, which I will turn it back over to Dr. Brewer. She started to explain that. We'll go a little further into that.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Harlan. So yeah, as I was saying, the Teaching as Research program, it's open to graduate students and postdocs here at TAMU here on campus in College Station. And it is really that opportunity for both students and postdocs to engage with that scholarship of teaching and learning, to really understand what makes for good teaching, what is some of the research on that, particularly with adult learners, understanding diverse perspectives, and really kind of taking on that with the same. So it's not just casually reading about it, but it's engaging with it in a systematic way. It is a 1-year program, and actually the applications are due, I think, today or tomorrow. Of course, we'll, if you know of someone who would be an excellent candidate, we would love to hear from them. And so students apply to us with an idea, typically for something that they would like to study in a university classroom. And then they come to us with that idea. We kind of work together to say, and they may come to us with no idea at all and just say, I'm really interested in teaching in my discipline, what's something I can do? And we try to find them a good problem to work with. Typically, as you know, any kind of research in the classroom, because these are research projects, you identify a problem, but then you're going to go collect data in a classroom. Those typically require IRB approval, so we take them through that process and then have them collect their data, and we help them analyze it. As we've said, there are a number of CERTL programs, and TAR is perhaps one of the most time intensive. So we do like participants to have some prior experience by the time they come to the TAR program. And this is our anticipated timeline for this year. As I've said, applications are due right about now. We hope to be reviewing those and making our choices, and we really do try to make it as broad of a group as possible. We hope to start in April 2023, helping students identify research questions, work on designing their studies and getting their research approved by the IRB, so that by the time the fall semester comes around, they are actually able to collect data on the questions that they've identified and work through that data in the spring and report their findings. So we hope we've identified a very doable timeline. As we've mentioned, one of the bottlenecks can be the IRB, but we work very, very hard to make sure that students get approval. And also important to know that there is a stipend that is paid to grad students at various milestones along this process. Getting IRB approval I believe it's like a $200 milestone, a $200 payment, and then you can get up to $1,000 if you write a report or submit a manuscript for publication and so on. So it is something that not only engages students with the scholarship of teaching and learning, but there's also an incentive for them as well.
Sure, thanks, Dr. Root. Just also want to mention that one of the challenges that students sometimes report to us is that because faculty aren't sure what this is, they're sometimes not supportive in the ways we might hope. So part of the reason we're kind of going on the road talking to different groups about this, just so that faculty are well aware of both CERTL and that Teaching as Research project, so that if a student does come to you, you are well informed about not only how this benefits the student, but also how it benefits you as a faculty member when your students might also publish some of this data. That can be another benefit. And then our third request, and this one is timely, is that we have students applying right now for this program who may not have an identified project. In fact, they may not be assigned to teach a class, and they are still eligible for the program. What we will do is we will match those students to a faculty fellow, a faculty mentor who wants to work with a student. So I can't make promises in that every faculty member who signs up will get matched. But we would love to have more faculty interested than perhaps maybe we even have students to match you to. And we keep your name on a list for a future term when we have a student who might be available. So if you're interested in having your course be part of a Teaching as Research project, and perhaps you don't have time to do that yourself, but would love to work with a student. Dr. Varuru is our faculty fellow for the TAR programs led through the Graduate Professional School. So she helps students with the intricacies of planning the project, IRB approval, all of that. So you get a lot of support to do these kind of projects, which we hope will also benefit your class as your students engage in Teaching as Research. So that's what we have today. Again, we did a brief overview of the CERTL network and the CERTL at TAMU programming, and then those 3 requests help us identify courses that might be appropriate for CERTL certificates, promote Teaching as Research with your postdocs, with your grad students, even faculty can engage in these programming. And then lastly, think about how you might engage as a mentor for our Teaching as Research students. If you have any questions, you can visit our website, which is in the rebuilding processes. So if there's old data on there, know it will be updated soon. We're still working on that. We also have a calendar, and feel free to email us at certl@tamu.edu with any questions. I'll add that to the chat so that you can access that easily as well. I will stop sharing screen and see if we have any questions. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to engage with you today. And like Dr. Orr, I also watch the Senate meetings and appreciate the pulse of our faculty at Texas A&M. So thank you for doing what you do as senators.
Well, thank you, Drs. Harlan and Viruru, for joining us today with the presentation. Moving to speaker comments, which I will keep relatively short today. First, some good news. As I noted in an email to you last week, all of the constitutional amendments were approved by the general faculty, so our Constitution is now in alignment with the reorganization of the university. Student mental health issues have been addressed significantly this year by student government. We in the Senate have also been working on ways to support faculty who are concerned about students in their classes. Our first seminar on this issue, jointly sponsored by the Senate and Counseling and Psychological Services, will be next week on March 29th in person and March 30th on Zoom. Please consider joining us for Supporting Students in Distress. A registration link has been sent to all faculty, and we have about 20 seats left for the in-person workshop. The following week, on April 4th, we will be joining the University of Texas Faculty Council for our annual joint meeting. I hope you're able to attend at least some of the sessions, if not all of them, since the joint meeting will again be conducted online. These annual meetings provide an opportunity to exchange ideas and to discuss the commonalities between the state's 2 flagship universities. Those commonalities are particularly important in the current climate, which finds higher education under attack from many directions. Finally, I want to assure everyone that the Senate leadership is closely monitoring the current legislative session. While many troubling proposals have been put forward, it's a long way from proposal to final passage. I'm hopeful that Chancellor Sharp, President Banks, and others in our system and university will be able to convey the value of what we do and the importance of higher education to the future of Texas in ways that will help safeguard tenure and academic freedom. We'll now move on to approval of the minutes from 2 previous meetings. Are there any corrections to the January 23rd meeting minutes found in attachment B1? Hearing none, I declare the minutes approved as distributed. Are there any corrections to the February 13th meeting minutes found in attachment B2? Hearing none, then I declare the minutes approved as distributed. Now for the consent agenda. Are there any other questions or concerns with the March 20th consent agenda items? Hearing none, I declare the consent agenda approved as submitted. Are there any questions or concerns for the Core Curriculum Council report found in attachment C? Hearing none, I declare the report approved as submitted. In terms of informational items, we have several proposed bylaws amendments found in attachments D1 through D4. They're on the agenda as informational items this month. They're basically cleaning up title changes following the management reorganization. We'll vote on the proposed bylaws changes at our April meeting. Also, we will have the resolution proposed by Senator Hale on the April agenda for a vote as well. Our final informational item, the Faculty Senate reapportionment report, can be found in attachment D6. It shows the realignment of seats moving forward. Due to an error in the spreadsheets that we were provided initially, faculty adloc to the School of Engineering Medicine were not included in the initial reapportionment. Having discovered the error, the executive committee quickly added a seat for NMed, so the school will be represented in the Senate, and the appropriate ballots have been sent to those faculty members. In new business, we have proposed revisions to Student Rule 10.5.2, which can be found in attachment D5. Secretary Epstein, please move the item.
I move the proposed revisions to Student Rule 10.5.2 found in attachment D5.
Is there any discussion on the proposed revisions? Senator Klein, would you please launch the poll?
We still have a couple more coming in. Okay, it looks like it has stabilized. So I'm going to end the poll. Oops, just had another one. 2. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And there were 68 in favor out of the 71 votes.
Okay, thank you. Then I would declare the revisions to Student Rule 10.5.2 approved. I now invite Speaker-elect Hammond to take us into the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Speaker Rice. I want to begin by asking if there are any positive actions or items of concern that are occurring on campus related to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I see your hand raised, Senator Hammond.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a personal statement, not one representing the Faculty Senate. I wanted to start by referencing Charles Sharp's letter stating that only merit should be considered in hiring. I am in 100% agreement with this statement. The Friday after the chancellor's letter went out, I was in a department meeting where a department had notified the faculty about the contents of the chancellor's letter. At that point, I stood up and made the following statement. All of you are part of our faculty hiring committees. You watch the faculty candidate talks, you participate in our faculty discussions about the candidates, and you know that this is true when I say this. At the end of the day, we always hire the best person for the job. It is only about merit, nothing else. Then my department had followed up and he agreed that this was true. So I want to emphasize that this should always be true across all of your departments. And those of you who serve on faculty decision-making committees, prospective candidate discussions, etc., I hope you've always made sure that this was the case as well. Second, I would like to clarify what I think DEI is from my experience in research and teaching that I do to ensure that there's no confusion and no misunderstanding in future conversations, as I've seen a lot of miscommunication and misinformation recently in regard to DEI. Before I say what DEI is to me, I would like to first say what DEI is not. One, DEI is not hiring someone for any reason other than merit. The best person for the job should always be hired, period. Any other reason sets the person up for failure, both undermining their own successes and causing others to doubt their abilities for success. Two, DEI is not giving someone something easy or something they think someone would prefer because of social or cultural identity or demographics. For example, I often ask people for insight in how to address the declining Hispanic and female student representation in computer science. Sometimes I hear responses such as, well, when they're on a team, I will assign them the easier part of the project or the visualization part of the project. That is absolutely inappropriate and insulting. Three, DEI is not having a different standard for individuals who identify as members of any social or cultural identity group. For example, a female computer science faculty colleague shared with me that when she was in school, she was assigned to an all-girls project team. She was fine with this and her experience in the team was fine. However, when it came to the time of project evaluation, she felt like she was being held to a lower standard by being on the girls' team. This was not okay with her. Four, DEI is not expressing surprise when someone performs above expectations for their social or cultural identity group. For example, I have been regularly told over and over again throughout the course of my academic career how unusual it is for a woman, me, to be so good at math. I began internalizing this, and my processing of these repeated comments influenced my performance, which led to me worrying about other people's perception of me. By the way, this is what psychologists call stereotype threat. Five, DEI is not asking someone who identifies as a member of a social and cultural identity group to speak for all of the members of their group. Why we would not assume that the perspective of someone from any social, we should not assume that the perspective of someone from any social or cultural identity group represents that demographic. Would you do that for someone who is part of the majority or dominant group? I don't think so. So then what is DEI? One, DEI is being mindful that history, life experiences, neurodiversity, and cycles of socialization, both personally and professionally across and within disciplines, et cetera, have unintended consequences. Two, DEI is measuring differences that may unintentionally occur from unconscious bias. For instance, when I ask my students to think about unintended ethical consequences of AI technologies, they mention how facial recognition technologies don't work well on black and brown faces, causing inequities in asylum seekers and other places. Recently developed chatbots have learned to parrot biased information about people based on stereotypes. AI systems are built by and trained by humans who are imperfect and biased. It is important to be aware of this and its potential repercussions. Three, DEI is performing research across our disciplines to identify what might be causing these differences to occur. Four, DEI is using evidence-based research models to determine what could help rectify differences to reduce economic, health, social, racial, and gender disparities in academia, society, and the world. For instance, engineering has been historically inaccessible to the blind and visually impaired, which should be a thing of the past given today's high-tech world and technological advances. In my own lab, we are working to develop such technology, testing it on both the blind as well as on sighted persons, as there have been much evidence that technology is initially built to reduce bias and inequality usually improve everybody's lives. Two examples of this are speech recognition and text-to-speech technologies. Five, DEI is creating braver spaces where our students, staff, and faculty can share their own experience relevant to DEI for perspective taking and relevant action. When students graduate from TAMU, our society and their future workplaces expect them to demonstrate cultural competency and emotional intelligence. Companies are well aware that diverse staff and teams make better products and make them more money than non-diverse companies. In my own class, we discussed this from a frame of looking at their own and their peers' natural talents through the Clifton Strengths model, making it clear that everyone brings something different to the team, and that is a good thing. Five, DEI is creating courageous spaces where members of our campus community feel a sense of belonging and engage in uncomfortable conversations of learning from conflict. Research shows that the first two greatest dysfunctions of a team are lack of trust, followed by fear of conflict. Communities and universities are learning spaces, and it is easy to quickly judge what we don't fully comprehend. Our campus community shares different life experiences, thus it is important to be mindful of where we are so that we model an inclusive campus where a sense of belonging is present for all to see, touch, and hear. Inclusivity is for everybody. Therefore, to help achieve this in my own classes, I interview every single student one-on-one every semester to get to know them as individuals and to ask them what I can be doing as an instructor for them. And most importantly, and finally, 6, DEI is often invisible. Every single one of us has different life experiences, and that includes neurodiversity and all other differences. We don't know what we cannot see, and it is unfair for us to expect everyone to announce their differences. DEI is meant to increase fairness in all walks of life. DEI is for everyone. Inclusivity includes everyone. Thank you. That's it.
Senator Rubin had her hand up earlier.
No, I just wanted to make a comment. I think about 2 months ago, maybe, we received at the College of Dentistry an email asking us to document whether we taught critical race theory in our courses. And I was wondering if anybody else had received such an email. Because it's in regards to a law that's about to go into effect, I think, in September. I'll send the email. I'll send the email to you so you can see it. I can put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Jorge is talking about the CRT, critical race theory law that's
about to come out. Yeah. Followed by some other DEI, anti-DEI laws that are about to come out or go up for approval, similar to what's happening in Florida.
Senator Campbell just raised her hand.
I just had a follow-up question on that. Are you talking about the law that's being considered on the floor right now, or being considered in the legislature right now? Or are you talking about a law?
It has not been passed. It is being.
It has not been passed. It
Okay.
has not been passed. It's coming.
So
up
the
in
law that would
September.
take the CRT and apply it to higher education. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I was just wondering if anybody else had received any information, because we received an email requesting that we document whether we are teaching CRT or not in our courses. I'll send it right now. It was from our director of curriculum, my assistant dean of curriculum, in regards to an email that she received. So I'll send it. I'll put it in the chat so you can see it.
So Tracy, outside of the chat, there's no hands raised.
Great. That moves me to our next questions. Any new business in the committee of the whole?
Yes. So before I begin, Speaker-elect Dr. Hammond, really well done. That was second time I've heard you speak about it, but I think it sheds light on really what DEI is. But my name is Pauline Wade. I'm with Engineering College of Engineering, Computer Science and Engineering. I wanted to just ask a question related to a task force that I volunteered for in response to Speaker Rice's request for help. I joined a task force to basically participate in reevaluating prospective vendors for the new dining services contract. And we will be having some meetings this week and next week. And I'd like to solicit any opinions from faculty. If you have any inputs on the dining services that we currently have, any areas for improvements, as I believe this task force will provide input for dining services for the next 10-year term. So this would be a good opportunity for everyone here to maybe voice their opinion, whether bad or good, on what we think of the dining services now that's being offered on campus and any suggestions for improvement. If you want to think about it, certainly if you want to say something now, that would be appreciated. But if you want to think about it and send me email, I will also add my email address in the chat.
So Trevor, was your question about this, or was anybody else's, Jorge or Senator Miranda, where you're about dining services?
Mine was about dining services.
Okay, go ahead.
Pauline, I'm at the School of Medicine, which is on Highway 47. And historically, we've had very limited dining services. And that is really an important mission, because people meet and talk and develop relationships around food. And if it's not available, then people, sit in their offices. So as you're considering this, I really would love to see more investment in dining services on the Highway 47 campus. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. I jotted it down.
I think Senator Alvarado wanted to comment on dining services too.
Yes, when I joined A&M in 2004, I remember going to Cevisa, paying about $6 for a meal for staff or faculty. Now it's close to 14. And I think I'm not getting better service. I don't think the food is better. By the way, about 10 years ago, I remember they had all kinds of selections. They had Indian food, Chinese food, Mexican food. Now you go there, it's whatever they have, So I think we're getting less for what we pay. And number one, and number two, we had that many options. Either you pay for the whole thing, or that's it. You cannot go there and pay for a sandwich or a small salad. It's very limited, and it's extremely expensive, in my opinion, for given the fact that it's a university, right? You can get a better deal from going to Golden Corral, for instance, right? So, or some of the local eateries, right? So, anyway, that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Hale has his hand raised. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Senator Klein. You're actually part of this talk. I think you were trying to get the Texas Council of Faculty Senates a couple of weeks ago. Is that correct? You're on mute.
I was unable to attend.
Yeah, so Senator Woolsey, I think he's on the participant list, and myself were able to make the Texas Council of Faculty Senates meetings. I have this huge speech here to say one of the great things we did. We met with Vice Chancellor Hallmark. We drafted a letter to the 5 major newspapers about Senate Bill 18. But I just want to thank Senator Hammond and yield back. I'm done. Here's the link.
Senator Alvarado just raised his hand.
Yes, are we going to have the joint faculty Senate meeting with UT Austin anytime soon? Has that been canceled? What's going on?
Senator Rice, do you wish to, or Speaker Rice, do you wish to?
It's April 4th. And
so it's going to take place, right?
It's taking place. It's online, like it has been the last couple of years. I think part of the reason of continuing it online is it has increased attendance fairly significantly, because people who couldn't afford to go one direction or the other for a full day have often come in for half of the day. So it's helped out a lot. But the sessions are planned by the Speaker-elect of our Senate, working jointly with the President-elect of the Faculty Council at UT. And they develop the agenda for the joint meeting. So if you have specific questions about the agenda, you could direct those to Speaker-elect Hammond, but I believe some communication is forthcoming on exactly what we'll be doing that day.
Okay, thank you.
And you will get a note out very soon describing all of that and invited to the whole Senate. There's been some changes of speakers recently, and so we're trying to navigate that and how that might change up some of the things we talk about in the breakout sessions and stuff. So we're trying to navigate some recent changes, and we will send it out to you as soon as possible. But I'm very excited. I think it'll be a great event. They're hosting this year. They specifically have it in Austin every other year versus here. Basically during the legislation sessions, they usually have it in Austin. They always have it in Austin specifically, so we could sort of join and touch base with our legislative counterparts and be able to figure out how we can form a common ground to move forward and learn from each other. So that's the rationale for it being in Austin every other year.
Senator Kolazinski has his hand raised next.
Yes, forgive me, I'm a little bit late to the party here. I know that we had already talked about responses to Tracy's statement, which actually I thought was very good. It took me a little bit longer to collect my thoughts. So would you mind if I put my response into her now? Does anyone object to that? So I think the big problem, Tracy, is that there's a difference between what DEI actually means in practice and the lofty aspirations that you listed in your statement. Because in practice, DEI very often does mean racial preferences in hiring and student admissions. It very often does mean racial quotas. And if you make DEI goals, such as what we have endorsed as a faculty senate, such as making the demographics of our faculty or our student body match that of the state, you're pretty much inevitably going to need racial preferences and quotas to achieve that. So I guess that's why DEI is under attack right now, politically, and why even tenure is under attack right now. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, poll after poll after poll shows that something upward of 70% of the American public opposes racial preferences and quotas in hiring and student admissions. And that's just, I mean, we're even being sued right now as a university because the administration put forward a program that was officially closed to whites and Asians in black letter. Now, of course, since the lawsuit came in, the administration has responded and clarified the program, and it now is no longer restricted on the basis of race. But had they not been sued, I'm pretty sure that program would be restricted on the basis of race. So I think, Tracy, what you describe as what DEI is, I think would be a lot less objectionable than what it actually has turned out to be in practice. And I see some Maria. I'm talking about ACES plus, not ACES. The memo, the ACES plus memo explicitly restricted the new positions to so-called underrepresented minorities. That's there in black and white. You can, you can see that it's available online. So yeah, there's a difference between what DEI is in practice and what DEI what you want it to be. And there's a disconnect. And that's why we're having all this political trouble.
Senator Hammond has her hand up next.
I agree that there have been lots of imperfect ways forward with DEI. But what I'm hoping is that my statement is a statement that everybody might be able to agree with, and that we could figure out how to move forward in a way that everybody agrees with, and we fix the imperfections and really make it about what I said. And I think sometimes we get lost in the weeds or whatnot, but I think we're smart faculty and we have good intentions, and if we can really keep our eye on the real goal and direction, I think that that'll help us move forward better together.
At this point, I
My
don't,
opinion, of course. I'm speaking for myself, not for anybody else. Just want to make that very clear.
at this point, Senator Hammond, I don't see any other hands raised and there were no more questions in the chat.
Then I return the meeting to Speaker Rice.
Well, thank you, Speaker-elect Hammond. Before closing the meeting, I would like to remind everyone that our Faculty Senate Coffee Hour will take place this Friday, March 24th in the YMCA Great Hall. Please join us for coffee, breakfast, pastries, and discussion if you can. Thank you. And thanks everyone for attending today. Have a good
Oh yeah, what Jorge
second
just
half
said
of the semester.
is important. Coffee with the President is this Wednesday, 8:45 to 10 at AgriLife Center.
Okay, then with that, I think we can adjourn today's meeting. Thank you, everyone.